The gift card.
Erica. And these were not Beth's glasses, so if anybody's still missing glasses, maybe they're not ours.
All right. I turned it off.
All right, a few housekeeping things. Someone just reminded me that this week there's a production out at Sleepy Hollow of Les Mis. So you could go out there. It starts at 8:30. Bring your own lawn chairs. You can rent some there. I went to The Little Mermaid with my daughters last week, and it was a wonderful time. But I haven't been to Les Mis, obviously. But it's on the way. You should stop at Barnes & Noble and spend some money, because that helps contribute to our funds, and we can give you more of these wonderful door prizes and all sorts of things like that. So when you go to Barnes & Noble, make sure that you have one of those little blue bookmarks, and when you make your purchases, a proportion of that comes back to our organization, and we can just replenish the funds. So that sounds like a great night out. Hit up one of the great restaurants, hit Barnes & Noble, and go to the play at 8:30, and then be back here for breakfast at 7:30. So we're going to start with this afternoon with our keynote speaker, Jim Burke. We had a discussion on the board about people we should, invite and seek to be keynotes, and we just started doing some connections and came across Jim. And I remember at one board meeting we discussed his name, and he happens to be the inventor, I guess, or the starter of the English Teacher's Companion. What is it called online? The name, okay?
How many people are members of the English Companion name? Oh, be a part. It's awesome.
There you go. And that's the reaction we got when we were talking about Jim. Aaron's like, that guy's a genius. He invented that, or he started that. That's awesome. Also, if you're not familiar with Jim Burke's work, there are Heinemann Publishing Company has come and supplied a number of books that he has published. So he has a number of books out there. They have copies back there. If you are loving what you are hearing from him, I highly recommend stopping back there, picking up some copies of what he has written. Basically, I just want to say on a personal note, I have enjoyed emailing back and forth with him. I'm excited to see what he's brought for us. But he is still a classroom teacher. You can tell he's acting like one. He's handing out papers.
You're a big shot, you expect other people to do this stuff for you, but if you're a classroom teacher, you're like, water? Oh, that's so sweet. Thank you. Everywhere brings me water.
So we're going to try to pamper him a little bit here, as we are all going to be the best students we can possibly be. I told him when I tried to recruit him to come here, I said, we are proud but few, and we have quality here, not quantity. So with that, I welcome you to North Dakota and to NDCTE.
Does this work also, maybe?
Yeah.
That'd be great. I just get nervous when I hold these things.
No problem. This is just out of the speaker, but then
Okay. I'll just use my teacher voice.
You're live.
Thank you.
Yep.
This is working. This is working. Not so much.
Oh. Why? Okay, now go.
Is this on?
No?
Is this on?
Wow. Oh, I'm sorry. This is all me.
Okay, well,
I'll get you going here.
I'll get started, and always just gotta appreciate the audio guy.
There we go.
You always have to appreciate the audio guy. Am I saying that loud enough? Let's see. There's no light on there. You always have to appreciate the audio guys. Okay. So I'll pass. I'll float these around. These are. I'm not like. Well, I guess I'm mentioning new things, but I've got 2 new books coming out next month. Not with Heinemann, sorry. And they're actually about half the size of these. I was kind of freaked out when these prototypes came. Like, it's not supposed to be big like that. So I'll just let it speak for itself. But if you could kind of pass those around and take a look at them, and there we go. So it's very nice to be up in North Dakota. Annie was very generous and invited me up here, and I said, part of the attraction was I just love getting around and seeing our country. I think I get a view. Carol Jago, you might know Carol's work. Carol Jago and I were kind of emailing back and forth about this. It's great that you have Kelly. Kelly is probably going to have some really interesting stuff to talk about next year because Kelly Gallagher is doing something that is really rare. I don't know all the details, but Kelly, oh, you're just counting. I thought you were saying bring your voice up. I thought you were saying you're a little man in a big world. Kelly has, again, I couldn't get a few of the details wrong, left his position in L.A., in California, for a year, could be 2 years, to go to New York City to work in a middle school charter school in Harlem that just really was willing to do everything they could to get him to go there. And so if he can get over the cost of just moving into LA, into New York, and survive that, I think it'll all go well. But that's going to be a really, like a really interesting experience. So my topic is an important program, I believe, teaching with tools. So I grew up, my dad dropped out of high school in the 9th grade. I grew up in a very working class family. Rug layers, carpenters, printers, pipe layers, that whole genre of work. And I'm really comfortable with the idea of tools. I grew up with tools, always got lectured, always use the right tool in the right way, put it back where you got it, all these kinds of things. And, don't use the wrench to pound things in when there's a hammer. And I think that had some kind of an influence on me. And then I actually got a degree because I didn't know I was going to be an English person yet. I got a degree after kind of coming up through community college and really having to learn how to be a student the hard way. And my path into being a teacher, into being a college graduate, into being an author is a long one that is I'm mostly comfortable speaking outside of California because I think if my teachers found out that I'd become a teacher, let alone become an author who told people what to do, let alone became a speaker who travels around and tells people what to do, they would just call the president. And it would just scare them to death. And I wasn't evil, I just did nothing. I got a D- in English senior year, and the teacher that I would say inspired me to become an English teacher. And we played racquetball together, so it's probably the only reason I passed. It was definitely one of those gift D-, minuses. I tried letting him win a little more consistently, towards the end of the school year. That was the only real, I didn't have any instructional strategies, but I had I'll let you win. And not saying that, of course, because then he'd feel ashamed and then he would flunk me. But so I when I went into college, I had no idea how to learn. I had no idea how to do school. And so tools have always been, in one way or another, I think kind of a bit of a mindset for me. And then I got a degree in cognitive psychology, which is, it's kind of curious, isn't it? How most of us get degrees, get teaching credentials in which we never have to take a course in how we learn, how we remember, and how we think. It's kind of bizarre, but it's pretty much the case around the country, with a few exceptions. And so I got this degree in cognitive psychology, which was phenomenal, training for being a teacher. And I was a special ed teacher for a while, so my beginnings were with kids that you needed to really work in different ways to help them to kind of get up and in. So now I teach all seniors. I teach kids in the AP classes, where I still have a lot of kids who, some people would say, oh, they're not real AP kids, but I don't think that way at all. So tools, the idea is, what's the saying from our communities, give me a lever long enough and I'll move the world. So I believe that you can do great things with tools, which come in all different sizes and shapes, as we'll see today, to get, what's his name? Vygotsky has his idea of the zones of proximal development, which is you kind of get into that developmental space where you're kind of at the end of what you're able to do. And if you get a little guidance, if you get a great teacher, if you get a tool that can kind of help you up and over to that next level, then you can make it. So this is all to say the tools I think are there to help us in all sorts of ways. And as teachers, we certainly have no shortage of tools that we need as well. Sometimes they give us tools. I was at a school recently where they were all given iPads, and there was no training, and the teachers felt like it was just, that many more things that you were asking us to do without giving us the time to learn how to do them. And so they did not say, oh, great, an iPad. All they could see were the demands that were being, as they were being invited to take on. As Don Graves says, teachers are like 5-pound bags into which people are always trying to stuff 10 pounds of grain, right? So that was just kind of another pound of grain here, and learn about this, and then learn how to integrate it into your class. So when I was thinking about this talk, I've not given this particular talk before, but I've written books on it, and I was grateful for Annie for the chance to really think about these things. I think we're at a crossroads, right? The Common Core is one of the things that we're thinking about. I think the Common Core is there, but even going back to the panel that we heard earlier, which was very interesting to me, is this question: just how do you get anybody anywhere, wherever they are, to get up and into the next level? To me, this is really what it's all about. I was reading a book this morning over breakfast called College Knowledge by David Conley, in which he made a very interesting distinction. A lot of his work was used to inform the Common Core. He talked about the distinction between college eligible and college ready, which I thought was very interesting. He said we get a lot of kids that are college eligible. They've satisfied all the requirements. They may even be in some of the top classes at our school. We may go, oh, that kid is so nice, and he or she does all her work and all that kind of stuff. And then they're college eligible. And then, everybody who's gone to college, you know where I'm going with that. And you get to college, and then your professor says, go home and write a 10-page paper. And you've never written anything but five-paragraph essay. And so you suddenly, like I still deal with this in my AP class, right? A kid will write a 5-paragraph essay for the first paper, and I'll say, so what does that look like in college next year when like a basic average paper in college is 10 pages? You can have like 2-page long paragraphs? You kind of go, I don't know. I thought about that, right? And so there's a lot of stuff out there. There's another book that I've been reading. I was talking to Stephen before about called College Fear Factor, which basically talks about those kids that go to the 2-year colleges, and a lot of the fear, a lot of the anxieties kind of huddle around what we'll talk about today, which is about college level kind of academic reading and writing. And I've got 2 sons who were freshmen in college this past year. They're not twins, but they're kind of on different life schedules. And it was fascinating to me to listen to what they were being asked to do. One had an assignment. This is basically the whole topic. Write a 15 college, 4-year state college. He said, write a 15-page paper on Walmart, is it good for America or not? So take a side, find evidence, and argue it for 15 pages. This was the assignment that was given to the son who called me like at the end of the first week of college. Your kids never know what you do. The president's kids. I don't know. He goes to this big house and talks to people. I don't know what he does. So my son calls me. His name's Whit. He calls me Thursday, the first week of college this last year, and he says, so don't you think about studying and learning and make notes, taking things and stuff like that? You live for this whole, everybody who's got kids that are old enough knows what I'm talking about. It's the first moment when they actually have to think about who you are and what you do and what are you good for. And so I'm like, yeah. And he says, so I'm sitting in my classes yesterday, my first business class, and he's a study business, and it's a 2-hour lecture, and about halfway through I realized, oh wow, this guy is just talking and is expecting us to pull out of the thin air the big things that he's talking about and write them down and they'll be on a test. He says, because I got to admit, I never took notes all through high school. He's got a very good memory. The first evidence of an illicit affair by my wife. The second is that was really strong in math. We're still working through that. But to balance it out, he did when he was young. He went to this workshop. They made T-shirts, and so he made a T-shirt that said, now he thought he was saying, I'm a genius, and he spelled genius, G-E-N-I-O-U-S. So just in case we ever think Witt is getting a little too big for his britches, we just bring up the t-shirt situation, and that just brings him right back down, you know, amongst us mere mortals. So you know, get into college, and you know, whether it's the ability to capture ideas and organize them, analyze them for a paper, from a lecture, you know, or anything else, it was really a very complicated set of techniques that kids, if they show up there and they don't know how to do those things, then what happens? Then they blow out after a semester or maybe a year, they fumble along and they leave. Right? So kids either show up for the game reasonably ready to be able to do what college asks them to do. And again, you know, from my background, I think there are all sorts of other directions to go than college. But if you even look at the process that you have to go through to be a barista at a Starbucks, it's like a 2-inch thick manual. It's technical writing. There are diagrams, all that kind of stuff. You have to take a test. You have to have oral communication skills, all this kind of stuff. And so the range of these literacies for college and career readiness is really, is really coming to the surface in a way that it didn't used to have to. So when I talk about tools, what I'm talking about are tools to help us read more closely, tools to help us get into what we're reading, tools to help us be able to write, tools to improve our ability to engage in discussion, tools to help us think more critically, because what you also find, if you look at things like this, is, well, I'm going to mostly be talking about the idea of generating and gathering, but there's a document that was that's called Framework for Success in College by the CWPA, the Community Councils of Writing Project Administrators, the National Council of Teachers of English, and the National Writing Project got together. You can get the document online. It's very short, but it's a very good document. These are the habits of mind that they basically say are essential for success in college writing. Like first year college level writing, curiosity about a variety of things. 75% of California State University professors, when surveyed, said that they were seriously concerned about the degree to which students evidence curiosity. So I think you have to ask yourself, what are we doing in our classes in terms of the ways we're giving kids a chance to work that makes room for curiosity? Openness to a variety of opinions, I guess, and ways of thinking about that. Engagement, creativity, persistence, responsibility. So persistence, when I get my first big college paper back as a shiny new college freshman, 10 pages typed, pre-computer era, I might add. So it's a very different typing experience than those of you who are and it has an F on it and has the word so. This is my only feedback. So in like 4-inch tall letters in red. That looked like he went out and bought an extra large red pen just for my paper. So I wrote a 10-page summary about it. So I persisted through what somebody else might have thought was, oh, this is ridiculous. Responsibility for your own ideas, flexibility, and metacognition, the ability to think about your thinking. If you look at the kind of more from the kind of the work kind of area, a couple different reports identify the ability, this ties in with the tools, to design, evaluate, and manage work, frame, investigate, solve problems using a wide range of tools and resources, communicate effectively in many forms, access and analyze information, develop new products and ideas, collaborate across different groups, demonstrate curiosity and imagination. What do you think in Tony Wagner's book? He went to all these different fields, business, science, engineering, everything, and he asked them, what do you look for when you hire people? What do you think the number one, obviously not like a position at a low level base job. What do you think was the number one skill that they all said across the board? Not important. I think they're related, but what is that? Asking questions. The ability, so it's related, but it's not just that, right? So we have this little thing in San Francisco where I live, we're kind of dependent on bridges coming in. So the new bridge, they spend like $1 gajillion from replacing the old Bay Bridge. It's supposed to open up in a couple months, but there's this little thing that they found that like the big 40-pound nuts are snapping off. Somebody maybe a little exposure before they retreat or something like that. So so all they need now are people who can ask the question that will lead to the solution. Like the one guy's comment was that it's still 10 times stronger than the bridge it's replacing. Like, yeah, don't start telling us how even flawed before it's been used, it's still better. Like, especially when you look at the amount of money that's been spent, it's crazy. So the ability to ask questions leads to the identity of solutions, creation of solutions, the identification of problems. In writing, obviously, it leads to the development of your ideas. It leads to closer critical reading. It leads to, in the workplace, it leads to identification of new services, new products, problems, and solutions. So it's tremendously important. The question is, are we creating time in our classes for kids to use? It's like kind of those late night commercials. For the question as a product. Like it slices, it dices, it does it all. But that's only one amongst many tools. So, and then if we get into, our favorite topic these days, in terms of the ones that we're really being asked to think about, is the Common Core. I was in Canada last week. I've never spoken out of the United States. And it was disorienting to be in a place where they didn't even know what the Common Core was, and when you told them, they didn't care. So like I'm so used to anchoring everything in that, so I'd be driving, and then the week before I spoke in Texas, which is not adopted it. So I'd be like driving down this road and making some point, and I would see like the Common Core point that I usually make flashing, and this other voice saying, remember, don't mention the Common Core word. So Common Core says, students, these are just kind of some of the verbs, the mental moves, to draw conclusions and make inferences, determine central ideas or themes, analyze development and interactions, analyze structures, delineate and evaluate arguments, analyze treatment of X, whatever X is, different texts, ideas across different texts, argue, explain, narrate in multiple media, develop, gather, plan, organize ideas, integrate, evaluate multiple sources, media, and formats. So we get to this place of thinking in our class, right? So I've got an article, which this comes from in the English Journal this month. It happened, so I was just really aching for a way to use that cool image that they put in there called Generating Minds. And it's all about, the question, if you can't read it, is how can teachers awaken creativity in students, and what do classrooms that do that look like? So this is where I'm going, right? What does it look like to bring creativity, which does not mean necessarily break out the crayon, start dancing around the room, like it's a huge creative problem to solve community problems or business problems or anything else. So in your packet, you've got about five sheets. This is in the front, and I spent a lot of time trying to crunch things down into this one page for us. It represents a lot of different thinking over time, and they're not. I would say they're not necessarily kind of hierarchical. Like this, just because it looks elementary, I would say is not meant to be at the top because it's simple or something like that. But it does come from a book called The Back of the Napkin by Dan Rome. If you go to his website, danrome.com, he's got a lot of other stuff on there. But his point is a lot of our best ideas, maybe you had one at lunch. Somebody's telling you something, and you go, I got to get this, and you just grab the napkin and start drawing on it. And Einstein apparently used to draw all over the tablecloths in restaurants back in the day, and then the waiters would fight over who got to keep the tablecloth. So in your packet, we'll work between these, and then there's a story in there called The Stones. It's a wonderful short story. It's from a collection called Short Stories, or Very Short Stories, or something like that. And so I want to talk about these. These tools are meant to be easily accessible, usable kind of on the fly, for potentially complex thinking, or more accessible thinking about potentially complex problems, right? Where you don't need the tools to get in the way, right? So I wrote a whole article in the Journal of Adolescent and Adult Literacy last year that had a circle with a dot outside of it, and it was about all different ways that you can use that. Right? Circle and a dot, or a circle and a small circle. For example, I walked into my AP class and I said, I think you could pretty much sum up all of crime and punishment with this diagram, this big circle and this dot. And so play around with that and see what you come up with. And I said, and I'll give you an example just so you know what I mean, and I'll take the easy one away, which is that the big circle is society, and the dot, one interpretation is the dot is Raskolnikov, who, because he killed a couple ladies, is ostracized from society and has to go to prison and be outside. So there's the low-hanging fruit. You have an example, but now you can't use it. And they thought there was nothing else could be discovered, and then they just, once they kind of start thinking, then, all sorts of ideas come up. So there's an example of what that looks like. There's tons of, it's amazing how simple but useful this diagram is. You don't know whether the dot, which doesn't mean anything because it's filled in, is moving away or moving towards. You don't know whether the dot being outside, is that a good thing or a bad thing? Right? It could be a good thing if you're the one holdout in, let's say that you're in Nazi Germany, you're reading a book about Nazi Germany, and you're like the book thief, and there's that one character who just will not give in, who stands outside, but it's pretty uncomfortable out there. It's pretty difficult to stay out there all by yourself. It may be maybe like Clint Eastwood riding into town, right? Wearing the dark hat, and kind of come in and stir things up. It could be an idea that's going to come into that round circle of somebody's brain, that things could be other than what they are, and so that idea is going to come inside and just completely stir things up, right? How many books that we teach are about a character who's kind of going along, and then some character comes into the book and plants an idea in other people's heads that makes them think, I didn't know that was possible. And the whole novel is about the way in which it shakes things up. So there's diagrams like that. There's diagrams like this, which I won't go into, but the quick, idea is that this is what we're trying to get kids into. It's the book, it's the unit, it's our class. We have all these kids that come into it. There's things that prevent them from getting inside. And then the question is, what happens once they're in there? What's the question that they're trying to answer? And then what are they going to do when they come out of that? So the real point for that is just how useful I find tools like this, as ways to think about things. So in your packet, this story, The Stones. What I want you to do is, we're going to read it a couple times. I think one of the interesting things about the Common Core is the extent to which it's going to, partly in the name of close reading, it's going to ask us to slow down and read, maybe not read as much, but read some things more and more deeply, which we know all good readers do, and kind of find a way to give ourselves permission to do that, right? So we're going to read it the first time for this, and we're going to come back around. There's a point at which the kids will hurt you if you ask them to read something too many times. You have to, there's this whole curriculum out in California that's supposed to prepare kids for the college curriculum, and I think there's some things that they seem to think that you can have kids read it 20 times. And it's just like a regular newspaper article. No way. So I want you to read this for the first time, just at the explicit or literal level, to kind of borrow some of that Common Core language. And when you finish, I want you to take those tools on that the graphic tools page up front, the circles and the squares and the diamonds, and I want you to find some way to represent that on paper. Right? And try to do it on your own. I'll have you interact with each other after that, and we'll do some things today collaboratively, but try to just do this on your own. So read the story, and then pick any combination of arrows, lines, circles, squares, diamonds, etc. that you want to just represent the explicit action of the story. It doesn't have to be deep and insightful. You're just trying to find some way to visually represent the surface plot of the story. Is there anyone who doesn't have a handout? Everybody else has a handout? one of the things, obviously, that's useful to keep in mind about something like this is you can't be wrong, right? As long as it makes sense to you as a kid to begin that first step into thinking a little more closely, critically about what they're reading, you know, and you can't, and has nothing to do, which is great for me, because I can't even draw an attractive stick figure, has nothing to do with your art ability. Now, I will say, this is one of those things where I would not give kids an example, because if I do, then I'm kind of closing off. To me, when you do something like this, it's, you know, it's always the surprise that's great, right? That kid that thinks in some different direction than you would have thought about. And so if I give them an example, then I have to kind of take it away, you know, which in some cases is not helpful. So I would not give the kids an example, whereas usually I model things pretty intensely. So when you're finished, you know, find some way to represent that, whatever makes sense to you, using only those shapes. So I'm basically talking about those shapes right there. Only a classroom teacher could, on the fly, so quickly incorporate a document camera. They happen to be standing there. And then when you've got a solution, then turn to the people at your table and just share them around and talk about what you're trying to represent, what you're trying to depict through the way you know, sketch that out. It's very helpful for kids to see other ways of solving the same problem. That in itself is a generative strategy. It kind of opens kids up to the idea like, oh wow, I never even thought about that idea. So start talking and sharing those when you're ready.
Yeah, I cheated a little bit, but you know, I did really quick. The faces of the moon. I did that out mentally, and then I put the rock in the middle. Which would be a circle test. Because for me, actually, it was a story about perception. And you know, it's almost kind of making fun of my garden.
Actually, I drew a very simple picture. I started with kind of a story. I decided that I wanted this to be dotted line representing the yard. That's what I saw, man. Right? Right? I saw it. So I thought this could kind of represent maybe the two different ways that this looked at it. It could be the one that could be
Even that idea
I suppose, Dylan. He said he wants it to be.
And so that idea
I'm trying to send some strange things to me.
I do.
I was doing the math. I was like, what?
So let me bring us back together. We'll kind of be interactive. So I should say this is very much like my class. My class is not me in front lecturing all the way. It's me moving in and out. And these modes of, you know, what are things that we don't necessarily think of as tools, but toolness is really just a question of how you use something. And so, you know, like a question may not be an obvious tool to people, you know, in that sense. Talking, you know, discussion as a tool for what? There's one of my favorite questions, what is the problem for which something is a solution? So what is the problem for which having a discussion is the solution? Even if it's a minute. There was a study done by Martin Nystrom in middle and high school English classes up in the, well, he looked at the research on class discussion as related to reading comprehension and engagement and retention and kind of overall literacy. And he basically found, the research said that nothing was better. Like highly structured, effective, outcome-based, like you need to come out of this discussion with 3 of these or 1 of these or whatever, was that nothing was better in terms of engagement, comprehension, and retention than effective classroom discussion. So then he had these people do, you know, he kind of passed out a survey and had them self-report, and people said, oh my God, do we do discussion in my class? Love it. Well, I got a big D tattooed on my bicep there. I'm so dedicated to it, and we're always doing it. It's why I became an English teacher, for gosh sakes. And so then they went into their classrooms, and what do they find? They found the average middle and high school teacher in the Northwest. So of course you can say, well, we're not from the Northwest. We do it the right way. But the average middle and high school high school English teacher had students engaging in authentic classroom discussion, which I would say is like what you were just doing, not, what did you get for number 4, Billy? Good. Okay. That's not discussion. The average teacher had their students engaged in authentic discussion 1 minute a day. But, and this is part of the interesting but, even 1 minute showed measurable benefits in terms of retention, engagement. Like look at how you immediately jumped in. I mean, of course, you're all good students. But if you have, you know, kids love to interact. What did I see this morning? Like everything is becoming interactive. We're even broadcasting this, I think. Social media, socially linked headphones, like by Dr. Dre. Like what? What does that mean? You're like sitting at home and like everybody else can listen to what you're listening to. Like, you know, where does it end, right? Connect our toilets to the internet. Like we could all be kind of together or something. I don't know. There's no end. And so even 1 minute showed measurable benefits. So just think if you just like threw caution to the wind and like doubled up and went 2. Whoa. Right? And then I sometimes think because like they said 1 minute a day, so that could mean that there was like none going on all week, and then they just kind of banked it up, and then on Friday they just went whole hog and had a 5-minute discussion, right? That averaged out over the week. And there's a lot of reasons. I mean, there's a lot of constraints in terms of time and all that kind of stuff. And one of the things that I think with discussion, for example, that we have to think about is what is the problem for which discussion is the solution, right? Just making the class more engaging is not a good enough solution. It's not a good enough reason. So I prepared you for that discussion. You came to it with something. You were able to see it's a generative discussion. It prepared you for the discussion. So anybody coming into the discussion would have something to share, and I would have been moving around. I've had boys in class who might otherwise not feel drawn to something like this, like they're on the football team. I'll say, you do this all the time. This is all you use to draw the football plays, right? Wow, I didn't think about that. So you speak fluent like X's and lines and boxes. I can't even understand what that means. I'm the guy who in my first middle school football game was supposed to go out and go this way and catch it, went out and went that way. The guy threw where I was supposed to be. The other team caught it and ran down. Then the guy took me off the field, and that was the end of my football career. So this is just kind of an initial discussion. So what are you ready to do now? Now I want you to go and just take, like 3 minutes as if you were a student, and I want you to write a summary of basically your diagram, because now you're prepared, right? You're prepared to be able to write a summary, so we won't go along with it, but just so you kind of get that feel of it, write a summary of basically what your diagram says, but try to imagine the English language learner or the struggling student, and how much this helps them kind of get up and in, and then better prepared to write than they might otherwise have been. So just a written summary of basically what your diagram is saying happened in the story. If you're my students, I would say, it's not a free response kind of thing. Try to write, use academic language. Try to use transitions to kind of indicate then this happened or this or whatever. So you're trying to, really reinforce that academic language for a summary like this. So sometime in the next 30 seconds, go ahead and finish that up, and just take a minute at your table to talk for a moment with your colleagues about how you might apply something like that back into your class. Whatever, I do this in my AP class. I would do it, in the freshman class that I haven't taught for a few years. So I think it works at any level. My daughter just finished middle school, so I've kind of been having that middle school mind. Now she's going to high school. Oh my. So will she stay the same sweet person she's always been? All of them going, not a chance. So anyway, talk with each other a moment about just this as a technique, right? This representing is what you were doing, discussing, and then writing, or some variation on that. How you might apply that to your class.
So I mean, this is the graph. That's not what it doesn't matter. I don't care. So I'll bring that in and say, okay, make that version. How does that graph like that? This line needs to be.
So it's funny because I won't make that, because you know why? Because when I say most expressions,
Right, yeah.
so I think that's why I have to show I cancel. But so it isn't fresh enough.
He's got a lot of really short knowledge.
Yeah, they still have the Comedy Central stuff, but the archives all there. But tomorrow I just have, you know, like funny archives. All the again,
Right.
Because even that, like, I'm not just like the other side. You know, and that's fairly tame for what you drop. No, it's very funny. Yeah, I just think it's, you know, I guess the whole time like how often. So, I'm in 30 schools right now, but I'm not going to going on this. Just put my mind on it. Teachers are just so excited. Especially now, it's more so the elementary. So, yeah, and you know, I guess we just generically refer to them all as basils. But it's like, and then like, I don't know, it's more. No, I mean, these teachers are like, well, here's my science paper. Elementary school, it's so easy to teach it all together. You know, like, addition can be applied to anything. You know, it's not like calculus is a little harder. Like, for you to like integrate calculus and your AP course, it's harder. Addition, not so hard. So, but I mean, everything is so compartmentalized.
I could see this picture being really sustainable. I mean, I don't even think this is said. You shouldn't have the answers. Put the visual on this, even a simple
Yeah, and I
figure it out.
no, I agree. I think, I mean, there's, I've always back and forth with that. Like, I think I tried a lot of things. But if you do a model, you have to have a model.
Well, it's actually start with an AP class. Originally started doing it, so you could do it either way. The index part, where you could have them index part, they're drawing.
You're in a high school in West Fargo.
Correct.
This is different. West Fargo needs a different East Fargo needs
We have, right. It's just Fargo.
It's more like Lansing.
Right. So yeah.
Yeah, it's terrible. I can see how I see it. It's terrible. He has a problem accent, which I appreciate, and all the chippers and it's just so much town is so much more.
That's true. They actually try to start Fargo. In the area. This is probably like your top 5, somebody 2 seconds. Yeah, top 5. I don't know if I'm getting anywhere. I think I am.
Unfortunate state of affairs. To the rocks. You know? And where did you do your arguments?
I did it actually.
Chicago?
That's it. Westmore was much smaller than usually. Sort of connected it out with my most of it in the last decade. Those school spouses playing.
I'm not saying like go to subs, I'm just saying why.
That is definitely a little bit of we also have surplus. We also
Okay, so I was going to show you mine just quickly. So do I have that set up there? So I had three different possible solutions. One was my circle and a dot outside. My second one that I was playing around with was basically, a circle kind of representing the stone community. That idea that you can be in a crowd and still feel alone. So the stone that's an empty circle or whatever, a white circle, whatever you want to call it, in the middle of all the others, it feels different. And so even though it's in the midst of them all, it has to go. And then that's basically what they all felt, right, at some point, because there's that idea that they've all felt that in the past. And then this one, which I don't know if I can hold it still long enough for it to capture it, the idea that what is a stone? A stone ultimately has to always come break off from some other stone, and then it breaks off and kind of, its kids come along and they break off and things like that. And so it kind of keeps moving out and mutating. So any comments or questions about just kind of this first round? This is just, again, part of the point. Think about some of the kids, not to make any assumptions, but some of the kids they were talking about in the panel. Part of the point is to get the kids in, right? And how do you do that? If you come from a place, whatever that is, where you assume you can't get in, then you're like this. You feel like you can't get in. I can't get inside this assignment. I can't get inside that literary text, right? The broken red line could be your culture, your lack of vocabulary. I don't know how to read this kind of text. I don't understand your stupid assignment, right? And then of course it's broken because you have those kids who just jump right in. What do you want me to do? Okay, juggle it around, do it however you want, and zip right on ahead. And there's always those 3 kids in our class, that make us feel like such good teachers. Right? That's the definition of a good student. A good student is one that makes you feel like a good teacher. So there's about 3 of those in most classes. And so if I'm trying to get the student inside that text, see, so even with these lines, even though I said I wasn't going to go back to it, they give you kind of a more complicated way of realizing the situation. So this is the text that you're trying to get into, right? It's not long. You kind of go, okay, I got it. What else is there to look at? And then if you want to come out of it on the other side, there's going to be a second set of broken lines, because maybe now you've read it, you've discussed it, and coming out I say, I want you can take a test, you might have problems with test taking, I want you to write your own story kind of based on it, and you might feel like I don't have any ideas, or I might say I want you to write just a summary. You might be like, I don't even know what a summary is, right? And so those things, and then it's broken because those people, there's always those kids that just, okay, fine. There's a summary, you happy now? And you kind of move on. So it's, what do you have? You have folded into this simple little activity, a fair number of tools, in the sense of writing as a tool for understanding, reading with a specific technique that I asked you to look at, using the diagrams to represent it, and then you have the diagrams as tools to help you kind of illustrate your thinking. So let's move on and see where else we can get. So this next one is figurative tools. This is by no means meant to be a complete list, right? These are just ones that I kind of came up with. So what are we talking about when we talk about figurative tools? Somebody tell me what you see going on in those different images, just in case you can't see what they all are. So this is basically just a bridge. In literature, sometimes they call it a character arc. Stairs, puzzle pieces, kind of a growth, like there's the bean and the different levels of a seed growing up. This is waves. This is King Arthur's round table. So like, however many different spots we're at the round table. This is not a maze, but a labyrinth. Very good. Can anybody tell me the difference between a maze and a labyrinth? I didn't know it for a long time. Say it again. It has the open spot in the middle, so that's definitely a piece of it. But just how do they function differently? In a labyrinth, you can't get lost, right? They lead, it's specifically out of the Christian contemplative tradition. If you go to like Chartres over in France, there's a beautiful one. There's one in San Francisco, and the idea is that you by walking the path, it's basically an act of contemplation, and you get to the center, get closer to God, and kind of almost like as a form of prayer. Whereas you can't get lost. Whereas in a maze, you're constantly having to make decisions. Do I go left? Do I go right? And you, of course, can get lost. So as figurative tools, they are different. This is meant to be kind of the idea of dropping a pebble in the middle and kind of things radiating out, concentric circles radiating out. This is a scale, a tree with roots. It's interesting when you have kids do this kind of thinking sometimes, how often they'll come up with the idea of a tree, but they don't, when you're jumping into figurative, analogical sort of thinking, you want to really try to make as much use, what are the roots, what are the leaves, what are the branches, like trying to, have everything sort of carry some meaning. This is a little hard to see, but this is a mind map, right? So there's the center there, might be, I think this is from Macbeth or something, but it's, it's just one of those mind maps that kind of goes in all different directions. And those are waves, as I was saying. So these are not by any means meant to represent all the different types of figurative thinking. So go back and reread the story. It only takes a minute. Reread the story, but you're rereading it now a little more for some of the ideas, right? Before we were reading it by way of just like what happens, okay? What's the service meaning? So reread it now a little bit more, figuratively, I guess would be the right word, analytically, and then go back to the sheet and look at some of those examples, choose one of those, and talk about what are the way in which the story somehow is similar to a wave, or come up with something that's totally similar in terms of its function, but it's not on my little set of examples. Actually, let's mix this up. So when you're ready, go through and then pick a partner. So work together and kind of make it a little more generative, a little more interactive, because you're a bit of a fifth grade class right now. And so work together, and if you have odd numbers, then have one set of three there at the table. So when you're ready, work together to try to come up with some kind of analogy, metaphor, etc.
most of the things that you do front, the last paragraph, twist. For me. So, I like that idea of waves. This is what the Stones are dealing with, but then there are all these other ways of perceiving how I don't know. That's what you got. Actually, wait, I'm going to just more. So, or whatever. It's going to bother me now. Maybe we'll have to see
I was just trying to think of different things that show so the moon was already it's hard to take another analogy.
That is funny. Oh, wait here. Oh, yeah, it is. Let's see. So, from left to right. So, that would be so, what I meant to say is multiple Robert. Yeah. That's a weird thing, though. Good point. Yeah. How do you metaphor? Like double metaphor?
Yeah, double metaphor.
Or is it like a nesting metaphor?
I like the thought this was important too. Some part of the analogy that shows have the scars of the youth, and yet still look down on the youth that they were.
That's why the wave is interesting. That's a really good.
And then in the middle, you have the big heavier waves that are crashing. I used to crash. I used to go all the way at the end.
Are there lakes? Are there lakes?
Yeah, actually, here there are.
This is not part of it. Minnesota has 10,000.
That's actually part of it. I thought
What is that?
the Native American
It's funny you mentioned it because I did just learn about it. Because I literally have and I watched it. And the dad got all, brought out how big is the lake?
yeah, it's, I mean, it's, it'll be actually at the end of the river, 50s, electricity,
Is that dammed off from Missouri?
so the Missouri comes in.
Tomorrow I was going to try to get down to that port. Wait, this was the last season actually here? Okay.
In the summer they actually do
How long is that?
I would say,
By the way,
I don't know. Yeah, I would say that's
pretty fast.
and that's why, yeah.
That was all. That was really short. There was no crazy problem. It's like power bars. Well, they must have worked. I mean, it's not natural carbohydrates we have. Right. So, that's why you guys get some work out tomorrow. I just haven't been outside. So I feel like I know like 27 years really well. But everything at the beginning of the trip has like bored. You know? I mean, I know more about English because English is great and all that English stuff. So yeah, I mean, although it's like, no, I don't know. I mean, I never had to read Emerson growing up. I never used to read early American stuff. Outside of like a teacher. What is the curriculum like? Is there a focus on any translations or is there?
So let's talk about a couple things about this. So, you know, I didn't get around to all the tables, but what am I doing in my class? I think we always wonder, what are you doing in your class if you teach this way, right? So it's like the kids just kind of turned loose. So I have 51 minutes, so I'm pushing hard. We had 58 minutes periods and then 59-minute periods. Why not 60? I don't know. And because we work in schools and to look for logic is just silly. But we had 59 minutes, and then they wanted to create a 7th period to the day, and so they scooped out 8 and made them all 50 minutes. And then but then of course they still expected us to do just as much, and we felt that was kind of unrealistic, and so we complained, and so they made them 51 minutes. So problem solved, right? Like, this is, you know, it's all we were asking was just another 60 seconds so we could get it all done. With adequate depth, and it's in there for good, and I'll never forget it. So what do you begin noticing? You know, as you first of all, somebody give me a reason why it was better. You can go both ways. Somebody give me a reason why it was better, or at least a valid choice to have you pair up and do this instead of having you do it on your own. Somebody give me a reason why that's an okay thing to do. I know you're scratching your head, but give me a reason.
I think pair share, so it allows you to bounce ideas off.
Sure, it's more generative, right? Like you're bouncing ideas off between each other, and you might have this idea, and I had a different one. But like we were talking back there about just the difference between representing this idea as the concentric circle thing and as a spiral, right? There's a whole different dynamic just between the slightest little thing. And so just the conversation that opened up around that slight difference, like, no, I don't really think it's like that. I think, you know, and so just right there, this whole other angle comes up. So give me a reason why not to have them, why to start on their own. Yeah, give me a reason why not to have them, like they're both valid. So that idea that you can kind of outsource, fine, run with it, and then I'll say that we both did it. So that idea that you don't, I kind of compare it to going to the gym with somebody who works out and then pretending like you're going to get stronger, right? So it becomes a question. So they're both valid in the right situation. Sometimes it's just a Friday, situation, and any possible way you can approach it that would at least give some semblance of engagement and interaction. Are you willing to do this? I teach all seniors, like second semester. It's like, are you willing to do anything? Just let me know. I actually expect a lot, which they give me a hard time about. They're like, didn't you get the memo? It's second semester senior class for like a first period. Everybody knows you're not supposed to do anything. What are you doing here? I'm not even awake. So there's that piece, right? So what's the middle ground, which is my tendency, because I definitely share your feeling about that. My tendency is to start with the solo. So even if so when you come to do the think and then the pair, if nothing else, you've got the beginning of an idea that has potential for you to realize there's more than you realized, right? Or in the blending of the two, then you kind of get to the higher level through that interaction, right? So they're both okay. I'm not going to have you do this because I want to use my time for some other things, but I would definitely like last time I had you write, I just had you write as a summary, right? Which is basically kind of say what those things are doing. What kind of writing would happen now if I asked you to write? What's that? In what way? Like, I mean, I know the answer is moving around, but in what way would it be more analytical?
Well, they would have to analyze why they chose what those circumstances.
So just by virtue of choosing the spiral instead of the concentric circle thing, there's almost like an argument behind your choice. Like, I'm choosing this because what this story is about or what this author is showing is. Right? So anybody want to say anything else about the idea? Yes?
Yeah, I think that it's when you go through these processes, detail starts to come out where it wouldn't necessarily.
What do you mean by detail? Like, you have to kind of get down to more to that granular level?
Right, and you have to look at textual evidence. So, I mean, we were kind of battling between our images, and then we kept pointing to things in the text.
Such a great point, right? Because I think this is really one of the challenges now, and that book, College Knowledge, that I was reading this morning, was talking about that one single difference when you get to the college level. Somebody goes, oh, well, I think it's like this. And then the professor, and maybe in high school, I go, oh, great, I'm just happy that he said anything, right? He was awake, that's all I want. That's all my teachers really hope for me, He never says anything. And then in college, what are they going to do? They say, well, I think it's interesting, how does that, show me something in the text that supports that, right? You go, wow, just relax, that's not necessary. Right? And so in college they're going to say that, like, what's your evidence? How does that, if you say, well, there's this whole thing, like I was talking about the concentric circle idea, there's an externality to it in the sense of like radiating out from the center of the family and things like that, moving away. But then if you were walking around class, you said, that's really interesting, but how might that apply internally? Like, is there a way to flip that same exact diagram and use it internally? So, so I gave the example of, kind of the still calm waters of the little rock's mind, and then suddenly the idea of what's out there. Like if you ever read Siddhartha, he's all kind of contained within his family, and then these wandering ascetics go by, and this makes him realize there's a world going on out there, and I don't know what it is, and so he tells his father, I gotta go. And his father says, no, you can't, everything's all set up, you're not going. And then Siddhartha stands there for 3 days until his father says, all right, get out of here. Because he realized that he already left in his mind, right? So if you kind of continue to push on these, they get you into a more analytical space, but they also get you, if we take that time, and I think that's really part of the challenge for us, get into the text and find the evidence to back up what you're saying is happening. The other related piece of that was coming up over here at the table was something like, what are the assumptions you're making about that? What are the assumptions you're making about the author or the characters or whatever it might be, and what's that based on? If you can't say, well, clearly, he's having a conflict with his father because his father mistreated him as a young child. Where's that in the story, right? Well, that's just the way it always happens. Okay. This, by the way, was primarily the rationale offered by that guy in Ohio that kept those 3 women, penned up yesterday in the news. I thought, really? You're going to blame all that on how you were treated by your father when you were a kid? Wow. So you get into this more analytical space. There's also, tell me if you disagree, there's also an immediately implied, some sort of implied organizational structure whether it's comparison and contrast, whether it's cause and effect, whatever it is, to the thinking that you would push into the writing. For again, I would have my students write a more academic, kind of analytical, paragraph where they're going to say, well, this is similar to a stairs. So there's kind of their focus, there's kind of their claim, and they've got to kind of go in and provide the evidence, the examples, and kind of build that out with transitions. So it creates a more academic climate that they're going to be more likely to be able to do because they're going to perceive themselves as able to, because they've already had the thought, right? So a lot of times when we look at academic writing, a lot of times it's because the kids that we're trying to get into the academic writing, academic thinking mode, it's foreign to them. It's not intuitive, right? There's nothing natural about academic language. When I was in the Peace Corps, I had to learn Arabic. It's like that. It's like going into a foreign country where you don't know the customs, the culture. The only difference is that every word I mispronounced over there was somehow incredibly offensive and always sexually tinged and always caused like a borderline international incident. They're so good I can't tell you any of them. I'll tell you this one thing. So if you ever see Star Wars again, it'll change your viewing experience. So all the Star Wars movies were filmed in Tunisia, like that underground bar from the first. That's a real bar. It's in a place called Matmata, where they live underground. And so Jabba the Hutt, right, a big ugly thing. Jabba the Hutt in Tunisian Arabic, Jabba al-Hut, it means the butthole of a fish. It's a little cruder actual expression than I said it. And so there's others in there, but that's the only one I'll offer. So we have this analytical structure that again, we talk about using tools to help kids read and write and think at more sophisticated levels. We need these are all part of the power of these is they're for the most part, like a kid might not choose a labyrinth because they really don't know what that's all about, right? But when you're choosing familiar things, you're not introducing an additional interference, right? So if you take like a spiral back there, the kids understand that, and that's going to allow them to use what they know to get to a higher level about this thing that they're still trying to understand. Anybody have any other comments or questions about that as a method or as a technique or like, but what about? Yes.
I just think, going back to our detailed discussion, I mean, if you want to make direct links to thesis creation, because, he was fixated on, I mean, not negative connotation there, probably it sounds bad, right?
We'll work that through with him later.
Yeah, he was focused on the scars and the parents looking at the scars of the children. I was actually fixated on the moon and this issue of perception and this anthropomorphic view of the world we have. And so, however you were going to read the article, that detail would then, start building your thesis. So that's an interesting activity for people, looking to find that traditional outcome.
Well, it's also a really great example of, I think one of the ways that we're trying to get kids to learn to be able to read, and I think we are trying to learn how to teach to some extent, and at least in some classes differently, is the idea that those could both be valid, right? So how do you lead kids in a direction for more close, critical, analytical reading that isn't like, and so here's what the story's about, right? Or here's the answer, right? Because you're trying to, because then you get to, again, going back to the college thing, you get to college and your experience is that then the professor tells you, what it's really about, and so it's guess what the professor is going to say. My master teacher when I was a student teacher was great at that. She said, so what do you think this situation means? The one that always grossed the kids out. She said, so what do you think this whole scenario with Holden and Phoebe means when he breaks into the house and he's having this big revealing conversation with Phoebe? And some kid would go, oh! She'd go, uh-huh. Interesting. Hadn't heard that one. No, you're all wrong. What it means is Holden is secretly in love with Phoebe, and Phoebe is his female ideal, and really if Holden could just work that out, he would marry Phoebe and live happily forever after. Kids go, oh, God's sake! Like, now the whole book is ruined for me. And sometimes I'd sit over on the side. Her strategy was just like link everything to sex. I think it was like they're teenagers, and not in like a dirty way, but like like. Really? You're going to say that about that poem? Like, that's crazy. Not a strategy that I learned to adopt from her. But she was the kind of tossed me the keys and said, like, call me if the room catches on fire, otherwise I'll see you at the end of the semester. The other one was a tremendous, great mentor. So you have this tool that kind of gets you in and allows for both those as valid readings to the extent that you can come back in, right? And they're narrowing down in at those close details, and the question and the fact that neither of them is wrong, but it's not a question that it's whatever, like, or anybody else's is fine too, right? Like, they're responsible readings based on, that some might be getting a little more granular, kind of down to the close parts of the text than others, but they get that foot in the door for that argument, right? Which is a really big piece of, like, why do you think that? What's your evidence? What's your premise? What are your assumptions? These are the kinds of questions that we're trying to really bake into the kids' heads. So the other thing that their reading brings up, which others would as well, is what are some of the ideas? So when you move down through, in your packet I gave you this one page summary of the standards that I created for myself. I find it very useful. So that's the whole Common Core on one page, on a 2-point font. And so when you look at that, as we kind of walk down in, there's kind of that explicit surface reading, and then you begin to kind of move down into some of the ideas, and then you move down into the craft. So go back into your table for a moment and just have a generative conversation about what are some of the ideas. Like what would be one of the ideas that would be associated with the idea of scars, like the idea that life leaves scars on us, like we all go through these journeys that somehow leave us scarred. There's kind of that idea. There's the idea of the elderly wanting to protect the kids from, let me save you the pain of what I went through. Of course, what we also realize is, but that's where all the wisdom comes from, is having the scars. If you protect them from it, then they don't learn. So just have a generative conversation at your table for a couple minutes about what are some of the ideas that begin to emerge in the story.
But that is interesting. He just to tie our ideas together. Receive scars. Also, I got another curveball. Curiosity bounced me to conclusions. And in some ways, everybody's conclusion is wrong and right simultaneously. Because we all make conclusions with assumptions about people of a certain age, about a certain type of behavior. But it's interesting because there's a lot of people passing judgment in this world, right? And in some way, and sometimes they close off the curiosity, depending on your vantage. And it's not even, it's an advantage point, it's a space in a life.
What a journey.
It's like a little, it's similar to sunshine. And I mean, so you're in your 30s. And it's weird because there's a combination. So, before this one, it was dry. But I found myself thinking a lot about you know, you're not, and recently, my daughter, my grandmother graduated all time this morning, so I wasn't sure she would do it. Afterwards, she told my Friday night camp is she's over too. And I just wondered about my daughter when she's 9 you know, and like, what's my point? My point is, I guess, like that time travel, seeing from different seasons. Oh, see, I got some. Like you say, I get these things. But that was, I was thinking about that in the plane, like, wow, my daughter's going to be old today. So I don't know.
So let's come back and generate ideas. So let me give you a couple ways to think about this and what I might do in my class. So there is, kids have to be able to write and kind of respond in all sorts of ways. One thing I do, you'll see a picture of it eventually, you'll see a bunch of kids up in front of it at the whiteboard with Post-its all over the board. So there's giving the kids an assignment and saying, now go home and write an assignment about the stones in which you discussed the theme of, you know, youth going off on its own journey, et cetera, and draw examples from the text, you know, all that kind of stuff. So perfectly fine, reasonable thing to say. One of the questions becomes, again, how much time do we want to take in our classes to open things up further that develop their capacity to come up with ideas of their own? So what would be one strategy that I might use, that I will use, not always, just when it seems like the right call. I might give everybody 2 Post-its, and I would model, and I would say, okay, so I want you to write a topic at the top of a Post-it. It could be youth, rebellion, whatever it might be, and underneath it, I want you to write a question that could lead to, like the answering that could lead to an interesting paper. Like is it a human need to rebel against and break away from your parents and kind of go out on your own? And then I would have the kids put those up on the board, kind of spread them all over, kind of like a bulletin board thing. And then I would, when they have that up there, so there's a sense of ownership, there's a sense of possibility, it kind of goes a little bit back to the generating ideas kind of bouncing off each other like you were talking about. And then I would have the kids come up and shop ideas, right? So it's basically kind of a marketplace of ideas. So they go up there and the board's all nice and colorful. And then I tell them that they have to take 2 ideas, not take the Post-its, but take 2 ideas off the board that kind of interest them, and they see some potential for writing. It's interesting, more and more kids now, when I do something like that, they'll take out their cell phone and they'll snap a picture and begin to use that as a tool in ways that I have not thought about. And that's led me to realize, like, so when I do something like that, I might snap a bunch of those pictures on my cell phone and then post them. I created a Tumblr account just last year for no other reason other than things like that, for the kids to be able to access it throughout the writing process. So I'll snap them, post them to the Tumblr, so they're there. So even if a kid later on realized, like, oh God, there was some idea up there, I can't remember what it was really interesting, it's kind of related to this. And so that idea of capturing things, tools with which we capture things, is there as well. So what are some of the ideas that come up? Just quickly, obviously not reporting out. I have about 35 in a class, so you're just a little larger than my class. But I'm comfortable with large classes. What are a couple ideas that come up? Yes?
What happens if a kid comes up with a whole new idea? Do you allow them to get a third Post-it, write it on and smack it up so they can do that?
It's a great question. What I think you're saying is, what if a kid comes up with an idea that's not on the board?
Based off of something that they saw while they were
Then no. I mean, to me, that's a great question. Like, to me, that's what we call thinking outside the board, right? That's the whole point, right? Going back to kind of that idea of think, pair, share that you were talking about. With now they're not kind of generating head to head like this, but let's get them all up there, And and there's so much behind the idea of like reading as an idea generating technique. A lot of times we think of reading as we're reading this to teach this, or we're reading this because everyone's just supposed to read Hamlet. But reading as a tool, reading as a technique, literally to generate ideas. And so when the kids are going up, in that case, they're using the board to generate ideas. It doesn't matter if they, in a way, that's kind of, I would say, the high ideal. Like, oh wow, this idea and this idea, in between them there's this other idea that I see and nobody else does, right? And that's great. And then they have no obligation to put that back on the board to everybody else, right? But what oftentimes, and then what that also does when you get into, because a lot of what we're really talking about here is a class that's really saturated with thinking. And so one of the things that comes up really is the culture of your class. Is this a class, like going back to that 1 minute of discussion in a class, what I would say is these teachers probably, I'm not saying they're bad teachers at all, they probably have an idea of their class as a culture of inquiry. And in fact, it's not a very rich culture of inquiry because the teacher is deciding a lot of what they're going to talk about, which may developmentally may be entirely appropriate, right? You need to build towards having kids do things up on the board. Would it be okay? Would I ever come in and say, here is this? Everybody has to answer the question of how is this story like a leaf rake? Silly question. But there's some reason why I think it's an okay thing to ask them, and then to force them to kind of wrestle with something that's not at all obvious. Yeah, if you have the right reasoning behind it. So ideas come up at this point as you discuss things. What are some examples from my class? This is one example of from class this last year. I love things like this because I don't care about the art. If you can draw really well, that's great. But I just like the idea. Somebody over here was drawing a three-dimensional cube earlier, and talking about why they were not going to do it, and then they decided, well, okay, I'll do it, even though I can't draw it. There's a whole different level of thinking behind their cube than there is behind a square. And so the idea here had something to do with kind of the levels of convention and custom and law and whatnot within which the character felt trapped. If you look at something like this, this particular diagram is for Siddhartha, but you have the first 4 chapters is part 1, the second is part 2, and there's 4 chapters in each section. And so you look at what are the words that describe what the character is like at this stage, and what are the words that describe the character at the second chapter, but what's changed? If the character was afraid here, and he's afraid here, is it the same kind of fear? If he was afraid in chapter 1, but he's not, like what happened to cause that change? And so these tools give the students a way, I think, of slowing down and looking at things. How would you characterize section 1 from section 2? And one of the things, for example, in Siddhartha that comes up is you realize there's this totally recurring pattern all the way through section 1, and then there's a point here, and then it recurs here again, and then only in section 3 does he break that cycle. So when you get down into the narrative structure and analyzing in the Common Core those ideas of how ideas evolve over the course of the text and things like this is called a character arc diagram technically. They allow you to look much more analytically. Some TV shows, what's the big one that's famous for doing this? Curb Your Enthusiasm by the guy, Larry David, the guy that kind of wrote the Seinfeld show. He doesn't have a script. It's all improv. He just draws a character arc out and says, this is where the character is at the beginning of the season, and here's where I want him to be at the end of the season for whatever reason. And so basically every show, the question becomes, is that something that will lead him eventually, like logically, towards the kind of character I want him to be by the end of the show? And if not, then no, we can't put that in there. So they give you analytical ways. This is kind of a more traditional brainstorm, but there's a lot of connections between key themes that the kid has identified, kind of going throughout. This is called the Pyramid of Hate, which is a profoundly useful tool for this kind of analysis if you're working with issues of hate. So I'll have kids in my AP class use this when we read Heart of Darkness, for example, because at the top it says genocide. So if you just go online and you Google Pyramid of Hate, you'll find this whole curricular unit by the ADFL, the Anti-Defamation League, that talks about how do you get to genocide. Not in a how-to sort of way, of course. And it starts, just in case you can't read this, starts with bias, stereotyping, insensitive remarks, belittling jokes, non-inclusive language, and then it moves up to, so each level kind of, there's a dynamic, right? So there's a whole essay right there, right? One, this happened, which led to this, which led to this. At the second level, you get individual acts of prejudice. So it's individual against that member of a group. And then you get to the next level where you get discrimination against the larger group. Like, you know, like what was the old days, Nina, no, Irish need apply, right? The idea of taking any group, we're not, you know, you're not eligible. And then once you start doing that, what do you begin doing? You basically start, because you're not a person, because we just, like, we don't even see you as human, and so no. And what does that begin to do as you move up? It begins to further take you out of that human cycle and then permit you to, if you don't see somebody as human, it gives you permission to escalate up into the next level, which is bias-motivated violence, murder, rape, assault, threats, et cetera, which is still individual. And then you get to genocide, which is because we think you're so, you know, we've taken you out of the family of man, you know, so this is where you get to the Congo, to Rwanda, you know, back throughout history, we know all the different genocides. The Congo one, a lot of people didn't know about it because in the Congo it's a pre-literate society, right? So if you go after the Jews in World War II, if one survives, the story's going to get told. So it's probably arguably the most literate culture ever for all sorts of reasons. And so as long as one, like what does Elie Wiesel say? So that we shall never forget, right? So that story continues to be told. But if you live in a pre-literate society down in the Congo, nobody, you know, they can talk it to each other, but nobody's going to write about it. Nobody's going to, you know, go out in the bigger story like that and tell it. So tools like this give us ways to think. There's Natalina, you know, kids in their notebooks. So sometimes just having them jump into I call it their idea book these days instead of their notebook. Jump into your idea book and find some way to represent, you know, this process, and then go in and explain that or discuss it with somebody else in class. The kids had to come up with an analogy to describe the way morality worked in a story that we were reading. So, you know, Rube Goldberg, it's one of those things where the ball comes down and hits this and it makes that happen. It kind of goes throughout. So this group had done that. There's all sorts of other models. And this is on an idea board, which is on the list, but you might not know what that is. So it's basically a 2 by 2.5 foot cheap easel that I got at an art store. And then on the back of it, I painted it with what's called idea paint. So I went to a .com company last year in the summer for some advising, and people just get up and write all over the walls. I was kind of curious, and they believe that basically they were in the business of ideas, and the walls were idea paint. You can erase it, turns it into a whiteboard, so they could just get up and draw all over the walls at any point, capture it, snap a picture of it, and then erase it and it would go away. So I couldn't paint my walls, but I came back and I thought, that is so cool. It's different than poster paint somehow. And so I made about 8 of these so the kids can get into groups. And I'll say, you know, each group did an idea board. They've got different, what do you call them, dry erase crayons that they can use. And I think kids think differently about these. So we already kind of went back into the story. One of the things that came up, and I'll give you, are you guys a Park State or a Smarter Bounce State? So this, it doesn't really matter. The reason I asked, I'm working with the Park group on the development of their assessments. So I want to build in a quick little thing here that I think is kind of interesting. I don't think this is giving away any golden egg as far as the assessment goes, but to me it's a very good example of one of the ways that I think the assessments, if everything works out well, really would ask for some different thinking. So I want you to go back to the story and I want you to read through, and I want you to kind of skim, and I want you to come up with a word that you think really has a lot of bearing in the story. Scar would be an example of a word. It does not need to be a word that you don't know. Right? So in the old school of thinking, you would get the example from this thing I went through when we were at Park one day would be, omnibus was in the story. Like omnibus, because they won't know that. Well, that's fine. How many have had the word omnibus come as a big issue in your like big discussion topic in the last month? And so the word that ended up being the right word to choose in this context for this thing we did was ravaged. Like there's a lot of just the concept of that kind of, there was a lot folded into the story that was kind of attached to that idea. So go back through and choose your own word, come up with a word, and then I want you to talk about that at your table with each other and try to arrive at one word in your table that you think really is a word that's kind of a load-bearing wall in the story. I don't think there's just one answer. You got to talk with each other about why you think that word. You guys are a great group of two. You might blend in with these three, just have to crunch a few more words. A little heavier lifting. All right, smarty.
I'm gonna go smoke water. I think what I think sloping.
I was saying, well, to talk about why this word, like conservative, is better than travel, right? Travel might travel is obviously a big action in the story and things like that. Or talk about why desire is a better word in this context than whatever, water or something like that. So the gist is, I don't know if there's much time to go back and forth about it. The gist is, you're looking for a word it's not a word like I would say water is it's to, even though it's used in different ways, there's water is water, right? It kind of is used in different ways, but conservative has more connotations, right? Desire has more facets to it. In fact, if you look up the word desire, what do you get? If you look at, I bring the etymologies of words in a lot. Does anybody know what the etymology of desire is? It's stars, right? The word serious or so desire essentially is related to that, desiring that thing that is up, like we wish upon a star, that kind of stuff. So the word desire, if you bring that in, especially when you link it to that idea of kind of far and away, it kind of links to the ideas of the leaving home. It links to this idea of the moon up in the sky and things like that. So an example of a question not from the Smarter Balance test, but that I think represents the kind of thinking that may, scare some people, but also make the test very different than we've seen, is the idea of a two-step question. And I think these are good for you to think about when you go back to school this year. So you have basically, question 1A and 1B. So you would say, you take a word like, which of the following definitions best defines the word desire? And then you say, go, because these tests are going to all be on computers in some form, right? They're supposed to be device agnostic. A lot of interesting terms here. Device agnostic. This means it can be on a tablet, PC, a Mac, a computer, laptop, anything. And so 1B, and there's a reason why it's 1A and 1B, I'll tell you in a second, would be go back into the story, and I want you to, fingering or mousing, if you had, depending on what you had, I want you to go back through and reread the text, and I want you to find 3 examples. Talking about going back to the grammar piece that you were mentioning earlier. Go back into the text. I want you to find 3 examples from the text that you think somehow illustrate the nature of the young rock's desire. And you would have to select, highlight the way you would, and you might drag them over into 3 spots. And if you didn't get 1B right, then your answer to 1A would not count, because the idea would be that you don't really know because you can't illustrate it. You see, you get that move. So there's a lot of thinking, right? It's not necessarily a word. Like another word was clandestine, which I said was not was kind of more specialized. But the truth is that clandestine would be another good word too, because it's a concept kind of word. It's not a word, and it has the added benefit of being a word that kids may not know. But the point is to not get into that overly specialized vocabulary like omnibus is just not. It's kind of too specialized. The word of so desire came up, conservative came up, the word gadfly came up, right? The word scars, I think you could do that. You could do some variation on that with the word scars, even though we know what that means, because it would be forcing you to go back in, and the examples that you would be expected to draw out would somehow open up that idea of not just literal scars, right? And then what you see is also that idea of what have we just done? If we do something like that, you're going down into, at the Common Core, you're going down and you're beginning to go into craft of why the word scars over the word lessons. We were talking back there a minute ago about how would it change things if instead of the word scars, it said something like the elders, drawing on those lessons that they had learned from life. That's more kind of a positive connotation, which they're just, packing into the envelope that says scars, right? And we know, wise people that we are, that's what that came from. So when we think about these different ways of thinking, explanatory tools are one of the other tools that are on there. Let's just talk about this together, because I don't have as much time. Explanatory tools are, the idea that these are things that you're explaining. Right? So there's not necessarily an argument so much as kind of a process that you see going on. So what would be an example of, I should just say I don't want you to get the idea that I march my kids through all these different stages each time we do something like this. But would I be okay asking my kids to do what you've been doing so far and then say go back into the story and think about it and come up with some kind of a diagram that explains it? Well, what if I had a diagram that just said on one axis was time and on the other axis was restlessness or something like that? Right? Would that be, or what if I just gave the kids, I said, okay, so you have an XY axis and you decide what's on the axes and just use that to somehow capture the story? What if I had the kids come up with something a little more along the lines of something like this, and they characterize the different categories of age? So you have, childhood, adolescence, young adult, elderly, and then along here you have kind of the characteristics of each of those stages. So it's not an argument, it's just kind of more of a sorting and analyzing kind of that way to try to explain what you already understand about the story. If you had something like a timeline or a map, that just becomes descriptive, right? But it still has that same quality. If I did have you write, do something like that, right? Childhood, adolescence, et cetera, to organize and I didn't tell you, I would just say come up with what you think that the different stages of life break into, and then have descriptions of each of those stages, and then pull examples, pull quotations or details from the story that illustrate each of those stages, where you say, pick any one of those models that you think kind of helps you with that. Do they then have a really highly structured piece that prepares them to be able to write well about it in an academic way? Sure. Life falls into a variety, life falls more or less into about 5 different stages. The first stage is, the qualities of that stage are, examples from the story are, which relate to this, but then that stage eventually, wears out over time and leads to this inevitably because of age, et cetera, et cetera. So we look at a little hard to see on there, but what it says from my board is what, why, how, so. So what you claim, why you think it, how your evidence supports it, and so what. Why is that important? So you put something like, you put kind of a spreadsheet up on the board to kind of get the kids, to kind of be a little more structured in their thinking. Have the kids, this is from Heart of Darkness, I think, so each of these is a stage or a station in Heart of Darkness, and these are the different characters, and as they go through, the idea is to track how they change and the nature of that change and the cause of that change as they go through. So it forces them to read more closely in kind of a structured way that is, at this point, just explaining based on what they see, but there's all sorts of stuff in the Common Core about how this character evolves over time, how this idea evolves or joins, and how these two things interact over time in the story. So when you set up what Bob Marzano, a guy that wrote, was it The Classroom Instruction That Works or something, talks called structured note-taking. So the shape is a tool, right? I mean, basically it's a spreadsheet. And I think when you set it up like this, it's a little less overwhelming because you're not saying take 47 pages. I mean, I've seen teachers in my department who have kids take lit logs that are longer than the book that they're reading. And so you can imagine what a love of literature and reading that inspires in kids. And so there are more like models, which could be archetypes or something like this. I'll come back to this model in a bit. Shapes like this, like Gregor in the middle, and 4 different perspectives from Metamorphosis on how Gregor, the manager, the father, the mother, and his sister feel about Gregor, and kind of the different details from the piece. And so you get this last page, this last section on your sheet, and it's got kind of just a lot of different stuff. But let's be clear. So aphorisms are like short little sayings. So these are sometimes materials. They're sometimes phones. There's sometimes case studies. They're all meant to be tools that you can bring into your class. So what does that look like in class? It looks like Post-its. It looks like having kids get together. Whoops. It looks like having kids like Kyle and James get together with an idea board where the tool is both the board as well as the conversation. It could even be the text that I have them read. right? Because maybe they're just reading a text to kind of get some ideas for that. So there's the Post-its on the board. That's Drew. Probably be in the Olympics someday for gymnastics. Amazing. A whiteboard wiki. So, or not, what do you call it?
Wordle.
Wordle, thank you. So, I love technology, but sometimes we take time, like there's just technology thinking, right? So you could take your class to the library to the lab, which for me means walking halfway across campus and getting the key, which maybe it's there, maybe it's not. We all know these things probably, and if you don't, then aren't you special? Oh no, I always have paper in my printer. I've never run out of any cartridges. And so the Wordle thinking, if you don't know it, the idea if you go to wordle.net, you can put stuff in there, and the more the word appears in the text, the larger it will be in the Wordle. So what if you have the kids, you basically say, there's a bunch of markers, take 5 minutes in class, and everybody has to go up and jot at least one word down, and we're going to make a Wordle. And so the kids are basically saying, not so much in terms of it's just literal frequency of repeating, but like scars is a big idea. So scars would be a bigger word than others. You could write down rocks, you could write down stones, you could write down parents. Like those are all kind of desire is a concept word. So this ends up being generative. It ends up being analytical. And then 5 minutes after they do this, then what can kids just, there's something in them. I don't know, it's like they're in kindergarten or whatever. These are all seniors. They're like just, oh, goody, we get to write on the board. Like they just immediately perk up. So then 5 minutes after we do this, I can say, so wow, defiance is really big. What's that all about? And it becomes a tool, a technique for moving into a discussion about the book. Right? So there's a sense of me, like my class. I hope it doesn't seem like my class is turned over to like whatever you want to talk about. Like they're always very deliberate structures. This could be a total of 5 minutes up there writing things down and 5 minutes of discussion or longer, depending on where we are on the stage. I've begun using my iPad a little more this year. For some reason, I just didn't fully understand that I could take pictures on it, and that was somehow liberating to me. The idea, like, oh wow, I can just walk up and like snap a picture of this kid's paper and put it up there and say, well, here's this great paragraph this kid wrote. Let's just get up here and take a look at it. Which those kids always really appreciate. No. So what do you see up here? You see an app. You see me having a phrase, Conrad blank the wilderness as. So we're generating a bunch of words, different verbs we could use. What does he say? What does he mean? And why does it matter? So these are all quotations, again, forcing the kids back into the text about what is he saying about the setting. It's got to be evidence. It's got to have the quotations. What does that mean and why does that matter? And then what you can see over here is me standing up in front of my class, kind of the way I am here with my iPad. I don't really have any fancy, setup in my class. Opening up, kind of going into the typing mode in this app on my iPad and engaging what I call collaborative writing. So we're having a conversation where we're trying to build this kind of stuff into a paragraph. And so what you see me doing here is describing the trees as ranks. This is not me doing the work for them. This is me facilitating a discussion, right, that's open-ended. I don't have a predetermined end. So how's Conrad talking about the forest? Oh, yeah, he's saying this. Oh, he's saying this. Oh, he's talking about his ranks. Ranks is kind of an interesting word. What's with that word ranks, right? So we're using discussion as a tool to deepen our thinking, at the same time to generate ideas. And so ranks, it's kind of like in the military, like, oh, okay, so that's kind of a fairly conspicuous, in a sense, deliberate choice if you're in a conflict situation to describe the trees as arrayed in ranks, as if they're like an army opposing you. So let's go back in there and think about that. So I'm trying to basically shape their language, describing the trees as arrayed in ranks. Conrad includes not just the forest, but the, quote, land, this jungle, and the very arc of the blazing sky, implying the universe itself is against them, offended for sins Marlowe does not know of. So that's me shaping a little bit of the language, but the ideas are theirs. So why am I doing that? I'm trying to use the tool, the iPad, and the projector to set a little higher standard in terms of, this is in an AP class, but I just scale it appropriately in my college prep class as well, and to get the academic writing. And then I'd say, great, so that's what it looks like, and I turn them loose, and they go home. So Bruno using presentations. I've just got a couple quick slides, and I'll wrap up here. Having kids go on here using websites and applications as tools. This is a personality inventory website, which I would never have kids do for themselves. But when you're writing a character analysis, in this case for Antigone, and the kids could pick whichever character they wanted, and they had to go on and answer the questions on this personality website as that character. And then it prints up, a survey, and if the results, and if you're Creon, then it says you're a jerk, and you need therapy or whatever. And then just probably call 1-800, we'll help you, and you can get help, Creon. Having kids create surveys, a very, very useful, interesting, productive thing these days in class, which we'll also collaboratively write. So the kids are doing an inquiry into fear this last year. We developed a 5-question fear survey, did a bunch of readings, and then we worked them together. And then, in class, we finish up on SurveyMonkey. It's all free. Here's a URL for our survey. A lot of really rich discussion about the language in those, survey. We all know that that's like a high art to create survey questions. And then I send it out to them. We all post it on our Facebook, social media, et cetera, et cetera. None of it can track back to the kids. So there's no creep factor there. It just sends you to the website. And then I come in the next day and we've had 200 responses. So we have all this data, which we then have a conversation about in terms of evidence to support what we want to say about fear. And then we incorporate that stuff, which the Common Core is talking a lot about. It talks about incorporating quantitative data into your writing. It talks about taking data in this form and translating it into prose, right, into written form, using images, as kind of metaphors to start thinking. Having kids in simulations. So this is in my AP class. It's Ren, John, and Audrey. And we were reading Hamlet, and I gave each of them a passage from the Prince, Machiavelli's Prince. They had to read that and then participate in this discussion as if they were either from Hamlet or as if they were Machiavelli, and represent the ideas applied to Hamlet, right? So a conversation, you can do those in a lot of different ways. Like if you're teaching Lord of the Flies. Let's see what comes next. Maybe I'll end with that image. So a place, like what does it mean to use a football field as a tool for your English class? First of all, if you're speaking in a state where football is really serious and they could eat, wimpy little Bay Area kids where I live for a snack. Like if I'm in Texas, they just really get no end of humor out of this. That's use your football field in California for you. Ride on it. Yeah. So we're about to start Siddhartha. They don't have the book yet. Siddhartha is actually a perfect way to end up with the stones. So Siddhartha opens up with Siddhartha saying, "I gotta go. There's a world out there, and I don't know what it is. I know you're great. I love you, Mom and Dad, and you just want to provide everything for me. But I'm, basically a senior in high school, and I need to choose this instead of having you choose it for me." But they don't know that yet. So what you see, and this only takes like my class is right by the football field. They're sitting on the line on the football field that corresponds to their age, and they're generating questions in their idea books, and then using those questions to write about what is it to be their age. Right. So for most of them, this is I think like October, November, in the fall, I believe, and they're all seniors, and they're sitting on the 17 to the 18-yard line. I do it, but I go sit on the yard line corresponds with my age. I'm not sure how committed I am to that in the long run. Now I'm at the 51-yard line. On the other side, it's getting, because they just keep staying at the same yard line, right? They're always the same age. So now I'm like down the other end. When you're writing, what's he saying? I don't know. Whatever. So football. So